So you won't want to walk, do you? All right. There's the compass. Take all the food and water you want, keep on 30 degrees for 2 days, and I'll help it keep fine for you.
The hell do you think you're talking to? I've taken about enough from you.
You haven't taken half you're going to yet.
Guys, welcome to a classic film review of 1958's Ice Cold in Alex, starring John Mills, Anthony Quayle and Sylvia Syms. Now, this was directed by J Lee Thompson, and it's the story of a medical field unit that must cross the treacherous African desert in order to reach the British lines in Alexandria. Now, along the way, they have to deal with the dangers in the shape of the German army, landmines and the sweltering heat. Now, what elevates this movie is the fact that it's not so much a tally-ho adventure as a fascinating character study of a small group under extreme pressure, and less of a World War II actioner as an uncomfortable portrait of alcoholism. Now, don't let that put you off though. This is an outstanding work by a largely unsung British director as he approached the peak of his powers. Let's take a look. So, Ice Cold in Alex is set in the summer of 1942 as Tobruk fell to the Axis powers and the Allies are in retreat across the desert, desperately heading into Egypt. Now, Captain Anson, played by John Mills, and his Sergeant Major Pugh, played by Harry Andrews, must evacuate with an ambulance, and they have two female nurse passengers played by Diane Clare and Sylvia Syms, and will soon pick up a fifth passenger in the shape of Anthony Quayle's Afrikaan Captain Vanderpool, a shady character with a shadier secret. And the film essentially is just them driving across the desert, pausing only to avoid landmines, salt marshes, steep sand dunes, and the threat of being shot by German forces. And for a film that takes place mostly outside, it's one of the most claustrophobic and sweat-drenched films in movie history. Now, before I go on, I was pretty fascinated to read that Ice Cold in Alex was at one point cut down by almost a full hour, this being a 2 hour and 10-minute movie, by its American distributor and renamed Desert Attack. Now, I'd love to lay my eyes on the hilariously and inappropriately titled 1 hour and 10-minute version of this film. I'm sure it's a complete mess. And of course, another example of the short-sightedness of so-called industry experts. But fret not, because today we can enjoy Ice Cold in Alex in all its punishing beauty and its original length. Now, I will talk about some of the genius set pieces in the movie in just a few moments, but first, what I feel is the spine of the film. And you might say this is kind of obvious considering the title of the movie refers to the goal of their mission, to have an ice cold beer in Alexandria. But there is a darker side to all of this. When we first meet John Mills' drunk Captain Anson, he's already sozzled on whiskey, much to the dismay of his Sergeant Major and friend Pugh. Anson has been through some pretty rough times, and his dependency on alcohol makes his new mission even more of a challenge, especially when his supply is blown up, when his jeep is commandeered.
I'll bet he's giving him hell in that foul German of his. My toolkit. My whiskey.
A tragedy that's soon rectified though when Anthony Quayle's Afrikaan soldier mysteriously arrives with a pack that contains a couple of bottles of gin and some other quite sinister secrets.
I can pay my way. I've got 1,000 cigarettes and 3 bottles of gin.
Export on Effie.
Now, I won't divulge much more on Quayle's Captain Vanderpool here, although it is quite surprising to me how many other reviews actually do. But I will say that he's instrumental in the group's survival. His strength, his ability to speak German, and his technical ingenuity ensuring the group get out of some pretty close calls. Anyway, Mills's battle with the bottle drives the plot for the most part, and it makes him quite a tragic hero. It actually sidelines him for chunks of the movie, as well as he battles against withdrawal and the sickly desert heat. Now, what I can mention is that early on, one of the nurses, Sister Norton, played here by Diane Clare, is fatally shot, and this prompts Mills to blame himself and his drinking and go teetotal until his ice-cold lager in Alex.
I'll tell you this. The next drink I have's gonna be a lager. Ice cold. When we get through with this lot, I'll buy you one. Buy you all one.
This is all great work from Mills, who was in many a British war movie of the 40s and 50s. He plays a character who knows that he's a weak and selfish leader, but who's also pushed to the depths of despair, of course making his eventual ice-cold glass of Carlsberg all the more sweet. I do have to give a shout out though to the ever dependable Harry Andrews as Sergeant Major Pugh. Andrews, I feel, was in almost every British film from the early 50s to the early 70s. He's got the least showy role here, but is the rational counterbalance in a way to the sunstroke madness unfurling around him. Now, Sylvia Syms as Sister Diana Murdoch has an unusual role here as well, certainly for the time. A prominent female character and one that contributes to the mission and the tasks required. She mucks in and holds her own, and of course, despite sleeping rough in the desert heat and ravaged by the sun and the sand, looks lovely throughout. Now, Syms sadly passed away in 2023 at the age of 89, but was a fixture on British television for decades. This may be her best known of her early film roles. I'd certainly recommend checking her out, though, in 1957's Woman in a Dressing Gown, which was also by J Lee Thompson, and 1961's Victim, directed by Basil Dearden. Now, it's pretty heartbreaking for me that Syms is also the reason that Ice Cold and Alex takes a bad stumble 3/4 of the way through its plot, when a surprise and really unnecessary romance between her and Mills is served up to us. It's a real shame. All the good work the story's put in presenting us with this strong-willed female nurse character is squandered as she morphs into a stereotypical love-struck female sidekick. Despite it being a dreadful miscalculation, it's not damaging enough to derail the movie on its course towards an ending so satisfying as to having the audience practically be able to taste the cold beer being glugged down. And of course, luckily, the film has its masterful Sisyphean set piece guiding us to the finish line as the gang attempt to push the ambulance up a steep hill of sand using an ingenious fusion of mechanical ingenuity and physics.
If you take the plugs out, there's no resistance. And if you put it into low gear and wind the starting handle, the wheels turn very slowly. Because the movement's so gradual, the sand isn't disturbed. Necessary.
However, as is the way with much of the movie, its cleverness lies in the fact that every triumph exists just on the edge of heartbreak. So J Lee Thompson, the British director who made Ice Cold and Alex, itself based on the 1957 novel by Christopher Landon, admittedly isn't a household name, certainly not these days. But he also directed The Guns of the Navarone in 1961 and the original Cape Fear in 62, as well as both Conquest and Battle for the Planet of the Apes in the early 70s. Here he filmed on location in Libya, with Egypt being ruled out due to the recent Suez crisis, with the actors pushed to the limits, drenched in real sweat and covered in sand and flies. It's a suffering that helped fashion one of the best British war movies ever made, and one of classic cinema's most desperate tales of endurance. Go check it out.
Worth waiting for.